Hello, everybody. Welcome to Empowered Through Compassion. Welcome back. It is brought to you by BiTap. BiTap is a way to regulate your nervous system and feel calm again. It's a patented wearable device that taps for you, regulating your nervous system in real time, creating a steady state of calm and focus. It has been successfully used by parents, kids, frontline workers, professionals, therapists, counselors, school therapists, whether you're taking a test, whether you're working through trauma inside. BiTap is something that could help regulate your nervous system so that you can feel calm again and do the things that you want to be doing. You could find out more information at bitap.com. That's BI-TAPP.com, COM. Hi, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving today. If you're listening to this after Thanksgiving, I hope you had a wonderful and beautiful Thanksgiving. Today, I am speaking with Jamie Marich. They are one of my heroes. Let me just say a couple of words about Jamie. They are, they've done so many things. They are a TEDx speaker, clinical trauma specialist, expressive artist, lay spiritual director, short filmmaker, Reiki master, yoga teacher. Um, what haven't they done? They've written many books on dissociation made simple, and their newest book, "You Lied to Me About God," just came out in October. That is a must buy about religious trauma. And they are also the founder and director of the Institute for Creative Mindfulness. Jamie Marich, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being on this. You are somebody who has just added so much to the field, brought with you your personhood, your essence to EMDR, to an understanding of dissociation. And today, you and I are going to talk about a love that we both have of Wicked.
You're going to
I'm so
defy
excited.
gravity together. I love it. I'm so excited.
Yes. Isn't that what we do every day really with our clients? Is we help them discover how they could defy gravity.
Yes. And Wicked, I was so delighted because we've been in contact. But then when we really started kind of nerding out about our love of Wicked, I am a big lover of metaphor. In a lot of my work that I do as a therapy trainer, I think metaphor, and that's based in my love of archetypes and Carl Jung's work, and then even so many indigenous healing practices that came before modern psychotherapy and looking
Absolutely.
at archetypes and or what we call archetypes in Western therapy.
Can
And
I just say really quickly,
yeah.
you're making me excited. Just
Oh
really
yeah.
quickly, yes, like I went to Africa a long time ago, and I fell in love with just masks, and even just the archetype of like when you put on a ceremony and you have a mask and you're involved in some kind of traditional healing thing, even the masks bring that in.
Yes. Yes. And oh yes, I'm so excited for where this conversation is going to go because The Wizard of Oz was our first favorite movie.
Wow.
Obviously it came out long before we were born, yet like any small child, we watched it on TV, I'm sure at the time.
Can I
Uh,
say something funny? And
yeah.
I promise I'm going to let you finish. When I was a kid, I grew up in New York. Kind of medium-sized black and white TV. I hated The Wizard of Oz. I hated it. I loved Annie. I loved other
Mhm.
musicals, but The Wizard of Oz, I never understood it because Oz didn't come through as color to me. So I'm like, what's
Mm,
the point? They're going into this world, but it's still black and white. And so I don't think so just a little kind of side
that's
note.
an
I love
interesting,
that for your systems that you
yeah.
enjoyed the Wizard of Oz. I never got into it.
That's an interesting layer to the metaphor for sure. And I think we got into it largely because we connected with Dorothy Gale and this idea of being misunderstood in your home space but still yearning for home at the same time because that describes a lot of our early childhood. Yeah, and we did see it in the shift to color and it was very impactful and we were obsessed with red shoes based on the ruby slippers and as simultaneously as we grew up, we also developed love of Judy Garland. Like she has showed up in our EMDR sessions as this guide from beyond, because to us, she was just the epitome of what a beautiful woman was. And then when we learned how much she suffered and struggled with body image and disordered eating and
Oh
addiction,
yeah, yeah.
um, I remember in a personal EMDR session I had, and it was like Judy was there telling me
Wow.
how perceptions are so warped. Because for us, especially as our little 4-year-old part, she just was the epitome of everything we wanted to be. That was beautiful and graceful. So we've had a long love for the Wizard of Oz. And then I remember even when Wicked, the Broadway musical, came out, we're
All right,
Broadway.
so that
Yeah.
brings us to a whole nother level here.
So here was my relationship with that initially, because um in our Wizard of Oz purism and our love of Wizard of Oz, when we heard what Wicked was about, even though we were a theater kid and loved musical theaters, it's like, I don't know how I feel about a prequel or what. And so I didn't take in Wicked for many, many years. I heard the songs, I heard Defying Gravity, I heard For Good, and it's like, okay, maybe I need to check this out. And then when I finally did, was just blown away with I relate to Alphaba too, and the quote unquote Wicked Witch, and it's all about people's perceptions. And this is not just a prequel; it's the feminist rewrite that I've needed.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
feel that both of them, especially when they come together, just have such a metaphorical richness that makes our system very happy.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, let me catch up with you here.
Sure.
Didn't like The Wizard of Oz for my system.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of pushed it away, pushed it away. Maybe it was because I was, in a male body and I
Mm-hmm.
did like Annie, but for whatever reason. And then I'm on Facebook. I'm hearing this buzz around the musical, and when I listen to it, something about Steven Schwartz, and
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of resisted him for whatever reason, the Fantastics, some of
Mm-hmm.
the other stuff. But then when Wicked came out and I heard it, somehow it spoke to the being within me, where I was like, oh my God. And I was a little bit obsessed when I started college with Rent. So here
Okay.
you have Idina Menzel, and now she has her next big hit. And so it just drew me in. And I'll say that, okay, so fast forward 2016, I'm in this class with um, all about motivational interviewing. And it was
Mm-hmm.
probably the first class that I took um, that really, really spoke to me. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved it. I'm like, oh my God, compassion and acceptance of others and just sitting with allowing somebody to speak and actively listening. I've been through two masters. I wasn't in
Mm-hmm.
that place where I think I really was able to sit and listen. And here were some skills of how to do that and how to reflect. And I don't know, it's sitting in this class, my head was absorbed, and part of my head was absorbed, part of mine soul, I kid you not, went to the Wizard of Oz. And I was like, one day I gotta write this down and share it. But and maybe this is the place to do it. But I was thinking about the Wizard of Oz, and for whatever reason, how it had the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Lion, and Dorothy. And it was like, okay, we're sitting here with Dorothy. She's our identified client. And we're going to dive into this wonderful girl and her world. And how do we really listen to her mind,
Mm-hmm.
Scarecrow, her heart, the Tin
Mm-hmm.
Man, and her sense of safety, the lion. And it's almost like you needed these three parts of her to all be present and to really be listening to these three parts of her in order to really get her and to help her understand these powers, these magical powers inside of her. And all of
Yes.
a sudden, that was my moment where I was like, the Wizard of Oz is pretty cool.
Yeah. And it is a perfect metaphor, what you just described, for this concept we generally loosely teach called the triune brain, or the hand model of the brain, where we talk about the brain stem survival, it's the lion, the heart brain, the limbic brain, that's the tin man, and the brain, the neocortex, the rational brain, that's the scarecrow. And I share in my trainings, Dorothy needed all three to get home. Because I think as therapists, we can vilify the neocortex sometimes, like, oh, you got to get out of your head and into the other brains. But all of them have a function, all of them have a
Oh
purpose.
yeah.
Dorothy needed all three to get home. And even one of the first parts maps that I did for myself. And so I think a lot of people who know my work know I'm not very impressed by models that are out there for parts, but I do love connecting with my clients on what stories fuel them, what archetypes reveal in the stories. And I can learn so much more about a person's system when they tell me what movies they like, what books they like, and how different characters represent them. So it's so
Oh
clear
my
to me.
God, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, it's so clear to me how Wizard of Oz was that for me. Because even when I talk about my system, I've talked in my books about how I have this 4, 9, and 19-year-old part. But I also have this part that I don't talk about a lot because she's very hard to explain. And she is essentially like Glinda in the bubble. This
Huh.
like ethereal, spiritual, timeless essence that I may be more accurate to describe her as a guide than a part, but she definitely is that part that
Okay, yeah, yes.
quality. And then after I saw Wicked, it's like, oh, she's pink and green. She shapeshifts just like my adult Jamie, who you're talking to right now. She can shapeshift between Dr. Jamie and Jamie.
Yes,
And
yes.
so, yeah, the Wizard of Oz is, oh, it's just so rich with metaphor. But to anybody who's listening that may not be a Wizard of Oz person, I would ask you to consider what story gets you excited like this, kind of like it's Wicked for us or Wizard of Oz for me as a kid. And that story will probably teach you a lot about what you need to know about your system and your parts.
Yeah, and okay, so I have a client and I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but if he's listening, he's probably going to recognize himself right now. I'll keep away every other thing, but
Yeah, yeah.
we connected over Marvel. And like
Nice.
our first meeting, I'm like, I love Marvel, and he got excited and said that as well. And it's similar to what you're saying. I think wherever you're using the your origin story, wherever you're finding that, or
Yeah.
wherever you're like is speaking to you, I feel like the Marvel, the superheroes, that whole universe is just rich with and texturized with all sorts of villains, and superheroes. And when you're able to kind of identify, not necessarily to say like I am just like this one or just like that
Mhm.
one, but if you could see echoes of all of them
Yeah.
inside of your system, there feels to me like this window of opportunity.
Precisely. And the MCU is rich with
Yeah, yeah.
and even how even as you mentioned Marvel, I mean, we love Loki and how somebody who seems to be a
How could
villain
you not love Loki?
might be
Come
more of
on.
an anti-hero, right? And when clients talk about characters that they really connect with, or even client or even characters that they're like you, it's like, all right, what is that telling me about you? How you're in relationship to this character?
Oh, or what is that telling me about a very loud part of you?
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
part of you is the one that's coming out saying, I hate this character or get this part of me away. Because I feel that um all of them have some beauty. And
Mhm.
sometimes I struggle with that. And I was going to talk to you about that, specifically with Wicked, because, and we could say he's hurt and he's struggling and, oh, this, that and this. I feel that ideally in my system, when you look at anybody close enough, there is some beauty, there is some essence. That's IFS. Everybody has a self energy. I almost call it. I was thinking about this. I call it like a soul. We all have some
Yeah.
perfect soul inside of us, and we can connect with our soul, with our spirit, and even the wizard, right? Which is hard. But in Wicked, it's this beautiful analysis of if we're able to stop for a minute and see life through the eyes of the Wicked Witch, Elphaba, which is a beautiful play on the writer of the original Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum, and just taking his initials, LFB, Elphaba. Um, if we're looking through her eyes, everything changes. Our whole universe dissolves as we know. This is what I was thinking as I was thinking of titling, our talk. It's almost like Wicked is the Wizard of Oz coming of age. And that
Hmm.
moment where we all of a sudden deconstruct our understanding of the universe. And now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. Not only is there a man, white, older male, behind the curtain, but the entire reality that we know has
Yes.
all been fake. It's all like this big cult. I know I'm
Yep.
sharing, I'm just pounding you with all these
Yeah.
thoughts in my head that I've been kind of thinking about this past week. But it's like we all of a sudden see this cult-like reality, whether we call it cult, whether we call it religion, whether we call it politics, which so much of us has been just blindly moving towards. And we're
Yeah.
all of a sudden seeing this different layer of reality.
Yeah. So a thought I have, I adore your use of the term deconstruction when looking at Wicked. That and the terms deconstruction and reconstruction we use in faith circles now a lot, especially if we're deconstructing from toxic or high demand faith or cults. It's
Can I just
how,
say too, I just throw this in because I'm so good at interrupting. What a beautiful book that you
oh,
have that you just wrote that I just want to, we'll put the title and all that, but what you're talking about now, you're speaking from a real inner
yeah.
knowledge and your book
Oh, thank
on,
you.
your life growing up and how you were how religion was really detrimental to a lot of parts
Mhm.
inside. It was just such a beautiful testament. So
Thank
I
you.
really give a lot of
And
credit for
that is
that.
my deconstruction and reconstruction story. But here's what struck me, that even as like I saw Wicked and it was the deconstruction, the reconstruction, as I said already, the feminist retelling, it did not make me love Dorothy any less.
Huh. Interesting.
Because yeah, of course I fell in love with the version of Alphaba that Wicked gave us. And it just made so much sense for me as an adult looking at it. Of course, there's another side of the story. I mean, with some very few exceptions around morality issues, I have learned there are always two sides of a story. And when parts are involved, there's probably seven or eight or more
Yeah,
different
yeah.
sides or perspectives of a story. And I think it takes an intelligent reader, an intelligent clinician, an intelligent person, an emotionally intelligent person to see that everybody holds a piece of the truth here. And yeah, so let's talk about the wizard because I remember when I saw Wicked the second time on stage, it was in London in early 2017, right after the soon to be president became president the first time. And I was just blown away with the
Mm.
layers of political commentary in this and
Oh, absolutely.
othering metaphors, connected to what we were going through in the world. And it's so interesting. And I know you read my Substack on this, how this Wicked movie has been in talks for years. And I remember the first production date I heard announced was 2019, and then things got bumped and delayed, and then the pandemic delayed things. Oh, I'm getting chills even talking about this. How interesting is this that this movie came out 2 weeks after the election?
No. Yeah.
And I think it's a wake up call for a lot of us to see there, I would say in black and white, but in this case in green and pink, what we're dealing with, what we're up against. And the wizard is such oh such a powerful portrayal of everything I know people like you and I think is wrong with either our field or the political climate or the world. The smoke and mirrors bravado narcissist who's out front and has all the power and uses and exploits people, often women and those who are marginalized, who have the real
All right,
power.
so I'm holding back. I'm not going to hold back anymore.
Don't
I'm not
hold
going to
back.
hold back.
Go
Um,
with it, David. Go.
yeah. So this
Like,
is a big, big, big disclaimer. If you haven't read the book, if you want to be
yes,
surprised by part two,
yes,
maybe skip over some of this because I
agreed.
might ruin some of part two
Mm-hmm.
coming up.
Spoiler alert. Yep.
Big, big flashing spoiler. Um, yes, what you're saying is so true. And I had this really brilliant conversation with my wife the other day about this because she just adds a layer to all of it. Well, first off, you got this white older male.
Mm-hmm.
And there's these hints that he is the one with the green bottle that comes in and is the father of Alphaba. And so
Yes.
there's a whole mysterious, like, is she being drugged? Is she being, is something something scandalous, but also something not quite right with that
Yeah.
whole affair that she had behind her husband's back,
Yeah.
and with
Elpha's
this
mother. Yeah.
man that just mystified her and seemed to be magic. Which let's put a pin in that because I'd love to talk to you about magic.
Mhm.
Um, and so then you have him, and he's rising to power. Now, I'm gonna just shout this out. You and I'm making this huge assumption. We're both Democrats. So, yeah, and maybe not,
Correct.
maybe, if there was, I think I spoke with Nakem a couple weeks ago, and they were fabulous, fabulous to talk with. And they said that they felt both parties were kind of the same. One was much more outwardly narcissistic, one was more hidden narcissistic. But even with the suave, smooth swagger, there wasn't much of a difference. Now, if you're going to look at like the actual humanity within Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I don't think there's much of a conversation. But my wife was saying what was really interesting to her was, what if we were Republican and we were looking at this movie? And how would we see the wizard? And would the wizard be more like, this Biden, or would the wizard be more like even uh, Kamala Harris? And
Yeah.
I was trying to wrap my head around that because it was really interesting. Because I think it's really easy and not necessarily wrong. It's real easy for my system to look at this movie and to say, okay, you have somebody who was born with a different colored skin, who
Hmm.
is now ostracized and completely pushed away. And you have this wizard who is basically saying, and there's a line in the movie where he says, the way to bring people together is to give them a common enemy.
And he
And
said, I learned that where I come from. And we know from The Wizard of Oz, he comes from Nebraska.
I didn't even pick that up.
Hmm.
Jamie,
So
wow,
that's a
wow.
very American thing he brings to this mythical world.
How beautiful. Well, okay, so this is just totally me going off on like my own imagination,
Hmm.
but it was kind of easy for me. And then I had to hold myself back to say, well, even just the whole land of Oz, like green, are we talking about late stage capitalism? I know they never
Hmm.
mentioned money, but if we're talking about structures and this fortress built on the green, I kind of even went there. Um,
But look, okay, let me go there further. Because green as a color is interesting to me. Because I think, again, it's the both and that, yeah, as Americans, we associate that with money. Because I think we're the only country in the world, if not one of the only countries in the world, that only has a single color of our currency, and it's
Interesting.
green.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so I think, again, that's one way you can look at it. And the wizard as capitalistic green. But on the other end, especially when you look at Alphaba as green, one of my favorite saints in the Catholic tradition, Hildegard of Bingen, was all about green because green is the color of growing verdant nature. And she
Yeah.
even had a Latin word that she used in her teaching called viriditas, which means the greening power of God. So like I'm jazzed about what we're talking about here because I think like so many things, green can go both ways. It can be this growing healing natural symbol, or it can be, for Americans anyway, this symbol of money and power. So the color green is fascinating, but I think like so many things, it can go both ways. And I want
Well, okay. So just to kind
yeah.
of continue along your line of thinking, you're so right that here, if we are saying that there's a relationship between the wizard and Elphaba, like here
Mm-hmm,
you have those two very different senses of green, where you have the wizard who is wanting to do this show of force and
mm-hmm,
is um so Madame Marvel is
mm-hmm.
the professor of sorcery. And she
Yes.
has a line in the movie where she says, magic is just the way we explain things we don't understand. And I
Mm-hmm,
thought that was a fabulous quote. And it almost felt like, okay, we're just going to slap on the word magic when we don't understand things. And then you have Elphaba, who
mm-hmm.
really honors who she is, who really is able to get to a place within the movie where she's saying, I love who I am. And I believe in what I believe in, and I'm not going to be ashamed or sorry or kind of just fall into what everybody else wants. I'm going to be myself. And you see this layer of greenery where she's able to dig into what I believe is real magic, where she's able to
Veritas.
actually fly.
Yep. That's Veritas to me. That's the greening power of God is the word Hildegard used, but we can simply say like the greening power to of integrity, of truth, of beauty. And yes, so many things can go both ways. Like even this conversation we're having about the color green, power can go both ways. Because I don't think it is a fundamentally bad thing to have power or to have privilege. And I've learned this from one of my mentors, who is Dr. Kelly Kirksey. I'll shout her out. That it's what do you do with that privilege? What do you do with that power? And I think when we see this dichotomy between Elphaba and the wizard, we see somebody who's trying to use their power for good in Elphaba's case versus somebody who's trying to use it as an advance of their own narcissistic needs.
But I'll add a layer of IFS to what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
If we're talking about self energy,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever we call it, whether we call it
Soul, self, yeah.
Buddha nature, yeah.
Buddha
Um,
nature, yeah.
one one use of the power is used to connect to that, to connect to others, to feel that
Mm-hmm.
connection. And then the other use is much, much more self-centered and it's self-serving. And it's really like, I'm going to use my power because what could I get out of it? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where there's this difference of real, true happiness versus this real feeling of isolation and disconnection, and dare I say, trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to dance us back to one other thing you said that I wanted to have some comments on. Like, what if we were Republicans? How would we see Wicked, et cetera, et cetera? So I have some thoughts on that, having grown up Republican and conservative Christian and in Christian nationalism,
Yeah, yeah.
knowing how Christian Republicans can think. Um, I will say a lot of people who are certain kinds of Christians won't even be watching Wicked because they think it's of the occult because it's magic. There's a lot of that buzz, going around social media. But for those who do take it in, here's something else I want to put out there. Because yes, obviously I'm a Democrat, but I did vote for George Bush once in my early days of trying to deconstruct and coming out. So I do have enough credibility, I think, on both sides. Something I've really learned that, yeah, I think for people from our frames of reference, we can look at Oz, the Wizard of Oz, and clearly see Donald Trump. But what I've learned in some of my study around cult dynamics around Donald Trump, is it just that American people have this fascination with putting the office of the presidency in a cult like position,
Mm,
regardless of if the person there is Democrat, Republican, whatever party? That this great and powerful leader is going to be the one to save us. And so whoever is running, I think, can naturally be set up to be in this elevated wizard-like position.
mm, mm,
Because yeah, I think that's one of my frustrations, David, when I look at politics in America in general, is that the American people are so, and this is going to sound like an insult, but I'll explain myself, overall can be very fickle. Like if things aren't going the way I need them to be going, then especially financially, like around the green, then that's why so many people go back and forth with who they vote for. And I think there are certain politicians who can better speak into that desire to be fixed, that the American people, or to be saved, not even to be fixed. I'm going to correct myself there, to be saved. Somebody who's going to either tell me exactly what to do or somebody who's going to do it for me. And if I can make the further parallel to my frustration as a therapy trainer, like, yeah, a lot of people like my work, but a lot of people don't, especially because I'm not ever going to tell you exactly what to do. The closest I come is when in my EMDR basic trainings, I teach the protocol. But even there, I layer it with messages like, when you're in your office, in your clinical setting, I can't give you a step by step on how to work with DID. because it's just so layered. It's so nuanced. It's so, you have to have an intuning, an attunement rather to your inner world to know how to and that's too hard for a lot of people, even in our field. I think that's too hard for a lot of people in society. And I don't know. That's where I get frustrated. So I'm
I
admit
don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I
okay.
love what you're saying up until that's too hard. I would shift that to
Yeah, let's
it
let's
is
let's parse it
super
out.
hard, but I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody has that capability.
I
And
do, I
I
do
don't,
too. I do
yeah.
too. But then again, let's go back to the Wizard of Oz. You've had it in you all along. I think this
Yes.
is what I meant to say. So thanks for kind of getting me there. That initially in the Wizard of Oz, like Dorothy was looking for an outside answer to get home. And like Glinda tells her, you've had it in you all along. So, what I try to do as a facilitator of therapy training is to help people tap into that.
Yes. Yes.
But I can also say cynically, a lot of people don't want to do that or don't believe they can. Maybe that's the
I
better way to
think
word.
that's what I think. I think
Yeah.
people have been given the message, trauma, that they are not capable of doing that. And
And I
that
need a
more
wizard.
people need that message of you are capable than more than you realize. And that when we
Yes.
start internalizing that message of I need somebody else to show me the way, we're lost because the
Yes.
way is inside of each of us. We all know what path we need to take, and we need to figure out how to slow down and really listen to what's going on inside of us. We all have those ears to be able to listen internally. We all have that. Whether we have ears or not, we have those that
Right.
way of connecting. It's just, I think some of us have been told and then internalize this message of no, you don't have that. You don't have that ability.
Yeah, because let's really go there. American capitalism stands to make more money by selling the answers and selling the gurus and the leaders and the wizard.
That's it, right? That's it. That's There we go. We get to the heart of the matter here. Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
I love that line. And for all these years that line has been in my life, I still get chills whenever I say it. You know, you've had the power all along, my dear.
Yeah, I have it
Um,
hanging up. I have it hanging up.
yep.
Here, let me just walk over. You
Aw.
are capable of more than you know by
Yes.
Glinda, the Good Witch.
And of course teachers can guide us. Teachers can help us. As I said, Dorothy needed the scarecrow, the tin man, the wizard, Glinda.
Well, but see, in my
Yeah.
cosmetology of the Wizard of Oz, those were the internal parts inside of
Yeah.
her.
That's the you could look at it. Yeah. Internal parts, guides, maybe both. You know, I think a lot of it depends on how you look at it, but we needed all of them. There were no, you use Dick Schwartz's language here, there were no bad parts here. Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
in yeah.
All right. Should I ask you this question that I've been sitting on? And
No.
and I know we could rationalize it, but in a deep level, I was like, I'm speaking with Jamie Marich. She has this amazing book out. We're talking about Wicked. I
Yeah.
gotta ask her this question to find out. I'm struggling with religious trauma
Mm-hmm.
and with the utmost respect to it. And my struggle is isn't all trauma religious trauma? Isn't in the heart of all trauma, what it does is it separates
Mm-hmm.
us from ourselves, it separates us out from spirit. And so, I've been grappling with that.
So I love that question. I love that question. This is why I tend to prefer the terminology of spiritual abuse over religious trauma because I think, but this is also a cool duality. I'll explain. Religion, like yes, my trauma, it feels organic to call it spiritual abuse because it was fundamentally my spirit was injured, and so yes, I think all trauma
Your
is
spirit was kind of ripped apart in a
yeah.
way.
I mean, if we're looking at like technically defined spiritual abuse, it is whenever God or any spiritual construct is used as a weapon. So that can be, a deistic God. That can be a spiritual concept like enlightenment. That
Oh,
can
okay.
be, and go with me here, that could be capital S self. If somebody is saying, like, you're not in self in a very attacking way. And I know that's not what technically you should do in IFS, but I know a lot of IFS practitioners
Yeah.
do
See,
it.
I feel like you said this on another podcast with Notice that you know, and I so respect this. You don't have a problem with religion per se. You don't have a
Right.
problem with Jesus. You don't have a problem with God.
How people
The
use
pro
it.
and how it's become structured in a way where the organization of religion, and I usually define my own religion as and distaste of religion as organized religion, and then
Mhm,
my own personal belief structure as spirituality.
mhm,
But once you put it into some kind of formal structure, and then you have power, and then you have
mhm.
the abuse of it, that's where the issue is. What we do in
Yes.
the name of God has been
Yes.
horrific.
And so let's unpack that a little further too, because yes, we often think of spirituality and religion as separate. So, like in my story, yes, my trauma was primarily religious in nature because it was because of theology in two specific churches through man-made religion, whatnot. But some of the biggest cases of spiritual injury I've seen have been in communities that tout themselves as we're spiritual but not religious.
Hmm.
And here is why. Let's
Yeah.
look at what religion even means.
Huh.
It comes from the Latin religare, which means to regiment. And so even somebody who has this meditation practice that they say is not connected to any specific religion, or they have
You're
a
talking about
therapy,
me, Jamie.
yeah, they have a therapy modality that feels spiritual but not religious to them. Like in my story, that's the 12 steps. Like the 12 steps are very
Sure.
touted as spiritual but not religious. But are there real regimented 12 steppers out there who turn it into a religion and ruin it
Hmm.
for people? Yes. I think as I've shared, that's some of the distaste I've had with certain IFS practitioners, with certain EMDR practitioners. I'll call out EMDR as well.
Oh yeah.
How when it becomes so regimented and so
Well, almost weaponized in that
weaponized,
at
that's
that
the key.
point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I think that's where even something that's beautiful and spiritual can be turned religious in the bad way. But
Well,
I
and
think,
ultimately it's a tool. Ultimately, it's
yeah.
this amazing, powerful tool, and the person who is using the tool is determining what the tool is used for.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I don't struggle with religion as a concept and have a lot of respect, like for the major faith traditions of the world, just like I respect the EMDR protocol, and just like I respect what Dr. Schwartz created with IFS. Um, it's how it's used that
100%.
I
Yeah.
think is where the problems can result.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm
Yeah.
with you.
So that always goes back to Wicked and Wizard of Oz, and how are you using your power? And where is your source of power?
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Wicked because there's another character who for me was so fascinating and I've been really kind of turning her over in my head over and over and over again. Ariana Grande's character,
Oh,
Linda, who this version really helps us see a different reality of her. And there was a piece of me I wonder how this is going to hit you. I'm sure it's gonna
yeah, let's
because
hear
you're
it.
just such an amazing person. It's gonna hit somewhere. Is she just another mean girl? And yet at the same time, I think there were moments where she stepped out of that mean girl persona because she's all about herself. She was pretty
Yeah.
narcissistic. She's all about her, and even what she loved about Fierro was that he lives the unexamined life
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't want to think too hard. She just cares about what people think about her, and she'll
Yeah.
transform into anything to get there. However, and I'm sure I know tears were running down my eyes in this scene, but the moment when in the movie she steps out into the dance floor because here you have oh totally and you have Elphaba who is just I'm gonna be me, and you have Fierro turn to Glinda and I don't know if her name then was Galinda. I think it was
It was
still Galinda.
Galinda still
Yeah, it
at
was
that
still
point. Yeah.
Galinda then. He turned to her and he goes, "She doesn't care what anybody thinks." And she turned to him and said,
Oh, yes, she
"She
does.
does." Could you tell I saw the movie twice already?
Uh-huh.
She turns to him and says, "Oh, she does. She just doesn't let anybody see it." And then when she was dancing with her, she was holding her, and Elphaba was able to be so vulnerable in that moment, and you just see the tears running down her face.
I think it shows the healing power of relationship. It shows
Yes,
healing,
yes.
the healing power of when we let the other in. I yeah, so your question about like is Galinda or Glinda, and even that moment where she's like, I am now going by Glinda in solidarity with the professor. Uh, such a moment of what performative activism could look like in one. Like they
Yeah. Are
even
you
nailed
you
that.
all have your phones on now as I make this speech?
Yes. First of all, I just have to say, I think Ariana Grande was the perfect casting choice.
Oh my God.
Some
And okay, little side note here. Her voice, man. Her voice
yes,
was like it sounded just like Kristen Chenoweth. I think Cynthia Arayo,
Arivo. Yeah,
Arrivo, her voice like
yeah,
blew me away. I was
yeah,
just in awe. Ariana Grande's voice, I was like, this is the spitting image of somebody that I think she looks up to a lot, which is Kristen
yeah.
Chenoweth.
Well, and she
And
met
big
her as a
spoiler
child.
alert
Yeah,
here, big time spoiler alert, because we're just talking about this. Wasn't that so funny when Kristen Chenoweth
and
put
Idina
her
Menzel.
hand over
Yep,
Ariana Grande's
yep,
mouth because she
yep.
didn't want to be outshined by Ariana Grande?
So I want to talk about the Mean Girl thing because yeah, I remember first when I heard that Ariana Grande was cast, I'm like, oh, is this just going to be a gimmick? But then I remembered Ariana Grande is a fantastic actress. I adore anytime she hosts Saturday Night Live.
I did
And
not know what a great actress she was.
yes, and then to see a literal pop star in the role of the archetypal mean girl. But I think we see that even when you get to know the mean girls, there's a lot more there, and it gives us pause to look at, do people bully just because they feel shitty about themselves? And when we actually get to know the other, and I have a lot of perspective on this because I am now friends as an adult with a lot of girls I went to school with in elementary school and high school who I saw as mean girls or popular girls. And what's interesting is I know a lot of people who I've worked with, like in the therapy world, have even given me the feedback, Jamie, you're like the popular girl. You're like unapproachable on some things. And then this is something Ariana Grande said in an interview that just to me really hit the nail on the head from the parts lens. She goes, we all have a bit of Alphaba and a bit of Glinda in us.
Oh yeah.
And I was, yes, for sure. And just the metaphor of the dance to display that. Yes, tears, absolute tears. When and they that was just so visually stunning how that came to life in the movie. And that was the shift moment when both had feedback to see, wait, there's maybe more depth to the other person than I thought. And I'm going to connect with
Absolutely.
them at a human level. As I'm saying that now, I know this is hard. It is hard for those of us who are more progressively identified, who are pissed off at the results of this election, who are scared for what it's going to mean. And I don't think we have to sacrifice ourselves to build a bridge. I want to be very clear about that because I has certainly embraced this bridge builder role in my life for a lot of years, and people do have to meet you halfway on the bridge. But I saw that's what Alphaba and Glinda were both willing to do. And
Yes, and here is where I was struggling internally, and again, maybe I have some parts that come up around this. Um, so what you're saying with that relationship, I feel is key with EMDR, and I had some questions for you, which I'll put a pin in, but I had some questions of like, Alpha Buzz, your client, Jamie Marich, you're going to do EMDR, go and to talk about that. But but then at the end of Act One, you have a defining moment where Elphaba says, Glinda, come on my broom with me. and let's be together. Together, and this is a line from the song, together we're unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And Glinda chooses not to. And my wife's take on that was that that's really fear-based, right? There was too much fear inside of her. And I grappled with, what did that say for Glinda as a character? And what prevented her from doing that? And how do I make peace with that so that I could still have compassion for that character?
Yeah. And again, we know that more is revealed in Act Two, but that's kind of why I like that this was released in two acts because it gives me pause. And when described like that, I think we can easily paint Glinda as the white woman who really worships the gospel of what people think and is doing what she needs to do to be accepted by larger society. But yeah,
And here's to your point. This is in two acts. This ended in this moment. Doesn't this speak to what we're experiencing right now here as a nation?
yes. Ooh, chills. Yes. So it's like, what are we gonna do with it?
And how do we have compassion for that character?
Because I know, and I think we both know this. There was a big part of Glinda that wanted to get on the broom,
Oh, yes.
right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
sure, but the parts, the sides of her that knew she had to stay behind to survive. I really do think it's about survival. Uh Stayed
Well,
behind.
but you could say that same thing. Like, I think the risk, you're right for her system, but objectively, you had those two parts that I don't know why the image for me that just came up was your conversation with Melissa when you were speaking about dragon energy. And it
Oh
was
yeah.
so powerful that concept of it's a snake and an angel that
Mm-hmm.
merges to form the dragon. At
Mm-hmm.
that moment, if we're going to look at it that way, the dragon almost separated. And
Yeah.
there was one part that remained, one part that went towards connection and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It really, what I was thinking was, if we're going to look at it through Glenda's eyes, are we really just talking about a tragedy? Are we taking the Wizard of Oz, which is this happy story with it, which is like, a child story with a happy ending, on the surface, are we turning it now into Wicked, which is kind of a tragedy?
Mm-hmm. But again, there's more in part two. So
There is.
what I propose is we have a date a year from today.
Oh, I love that. Yes,
Because
yes.
A, we will both have watched part two, and B, we'll see how a year under the new administration will look like for our clients
Yeah,
and
yeah.
for the people that we are attempting to still be in relationship with.
Oh, I so take you up on that.
Hey,
Yeah, that would
we'll
be. And hopefully we'll talk before then. But yeah, yeah. Because it did leave us with this big question of
Mhm.
what's going to happen to these two women.
And I have to say, when I found out they were releasing it in two parts, there was a bit of me that was a little bummed. Like, oh, this is a
Yeah.
Hollywood's ploy to make more money. And come on, they do the whole musical in 2.5 hours. What? Yet now that they did it this way, I'm really glad because it gave us more depth of exploration. And yeah, we're in a cliffhanger as a nation. So I think
Yes.
the timing worked out exactly how it was supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Let me ask you, this is a typical podcast question here.
Go for
Is
it.
there anything that you feel that we haven't said, about Wicked or about anything else that you feel would be an important message to put out
This
there?
this is just such a dream conversation to me to be able to have anybody who's an EMDR and IFS person who wants to get nerdy about archetypes and mythology and literature. Because to me, this is where it's at. And for a lot of people who know my background, we started in the arts and English and history.
Oh,
We
yeah,
totally
yes.
got into this field through the back door. And we always say we're much more of an artist than a scientist as a therapist, as a teacher of therapy. So to have somebody who's a musicals person and a story and myth person to talk about so many things I love to talk about in therapy, but to share about these two beautiful stories. This is just our favorite interview we've done this year. We're gonna put it out there and say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. I often for a little while now have been thinking, isn't this the way to really share these modalities is through being able to deconstruct some of the more popular things that are put out there,
Mhm.
and actually have an accurate or more
Mhm.
accurate understanding through a lens of EMDR or through IFS or through whatever modality of what is going on inside some of the TV shows, some of the movies, and this is a wonderful one. I know I got together with Tammy, who's IFS podcast for Inside Out, because that would really
Nice.
spoke to our
Another great
Inside
one.
Out parts. But I'd love to just
It's
see like
about
what
that
are the
too.
different things and pick them apart more and more.
Yeah. So to listeners of your podcast, I would say if you like what you've heard from me today about this, my book Dissociation Made Simple, which now has a flip chart, is really my deconstruction of how dissociation has been educated about in our field. So, and I do use a lot with parts mapping about story, myth, mythology, archetypes, and connecting with clients likes that way to help map the inner world. If you connect with what we've said about spirituality and trauma and power, my memoir, You Lied to Me About God, is now out. So that could be a good resource for you to check out. And yeah, I have started to dip into the world of Substack because my company, Institute for Creative Mindfulness, we have a blog. And I do a lot of my EMDR blogging on there with some of my hot takes on EMDR things. But like David and I connected over this from the Substack I wrote with my review of Wicked. I did one about Inside Out too as well. So if you like some of these pop culture takes, you just go to Substack, search my name, and I could send you the link, David, for the show notes. Yeah, check us out there.
Thank you, Jamie, for you and all of you being here. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you and all of you for the willingness to host us.